And I will not give a long introduction to Adam. We are grateful that he's here. He has his own annual conference, speaks in a number of annual conferences in much the same way that our own George Acevedo is a resource all around the church. But I want you to just know that Adam is the founding pastor of the Church of the Resurrection in Kansas City. It is the largest United Methodist church in the United States, with worship attendance of over 10,000 persons each weekend. He was the founding pastor. They began in a funeral home, which is why they named themselves the Church of the Resurrection. He has been the speaker at the Willow Creek Summit and the preacher at the second inauguration of President Barack Obama. He has a passion for the renewal of the church and for connecting with the next generations and the gospel. And for these reasons, we invited Adam Hamilton to be with us. Many of your churches have studied his materials, and at least 2 lay people in a church I was in Okeechobee 2 Sundays ago told me how thrilled they were that Adam was going to be here because their small group had read every one of his books. So Adam, we welcome you to the Florida Conference.
Thank you, Bishop. Great to be with you today. And it's a privilege to be with all of you. Wow, what about the choir? That was unbelievable. That was fantastic. And it's just a joy to be here in Florida with you. I so value and appreciate your bishop, and I know you do as well. Just a tremendous leader across the denomination, and we're grateful for him. So many of my friends are here in this annual conference, and it's been fun to look around and see some of you and to have a chance to, looking forward to having a chance to connect with you in between the breaks. And also I want to say that, as many of you know, Church of the Resurrection has been praying for every one of your churches. So we made a commitment 7 years ago that I was going to try to take this teaching that I'm sharing with you to every annual conference in the United States. You're my 39th annual conference in 7 years. And so if you love going to annual conference, try doing it 39 times in 7 years. It's not as much fun as it was when I began, but I will tell you, I love having a chance to meet United Methodists, the people called Methodists across the country. And one of the ways that our congregation, so they send me out for 3 weeks and say, just go do this. And the reason for that is that we believe in the United Methodist Church. We believe in the gospel and the way that we proclaim it and preach it, and the DNA that's a Wesleyan DNA. And we think that it has the greatest opportunity to reach non-religious and nominally religious people in the 21st century. We think we have an approach to the gospel that really matters. And our hope is, in sharing some of the things I'm going to share with you, that I might inspire, encourage, and equip you. I'm going to try to give you some concrete and tangible ideas that will work in any size church. I'm going to be talking a bit about theory and some of the things that it takes to create dynamic congregations. And these aren't things I've just learned from Church of the Resurrection. I've learned these from churches in Russia. I've learned them from churches in South Africa. I've seen them in churches in Honduras. I've watched them in little tiny churches, and I've watched them in big churches, and I want to share some of these things with you. The congregation has seen these, and I see these as leadership revivals. So I see my 3 talks with you as a sort of revival of sorts. And what we know is that in the history of Christianity, I can't find a single time where revivals happened in Christianity without people praying. Prayer has always been an essential part of revival in the church, and this is why our congregation has committed to pray for every one of your churches for 30 days straight, and every one of the pastors. We don't have the names of the lay people, but we were able to get the names of your pastors, and hopefully most of you received a note from somebody, at least one person who was praying for you, you clergy. How many of you received a note from somebody? That's terrific. What we did is we had these little prayer tents in church 3 weeks ago, just before I left. You're my last annual conference for this year. And we had these, we asked our people, please don't take one unless you're willing to commit to pray every day for 30 days for this congregation and this pastor. We fold them up into little tents, and they put them where they brush their teeth, because Methodists are good at brushing their teeth. And so we asked them to put them there and to be praying. And I took one from each of the annual conferences that I was going to be visiting. And the person who I've been praying for the last 3 weeks, again this morning on my knees in Wichita, Kansas, is Sue Hoppert Johnson. And I noticed that Sue was the first person elected to the General Conference. I'm not taking any credit for that. I'm just saying, though, that I was praying for her every day for the last 3 weeks. And for the congregation, is it Ocala? Ocala, I'm sorry. Ocala was the name I had associated. So I've been praying for the Ocala Church for the last 3 weeks as well. Anyway, it's great to have a chance to be with you today. I'm really honored to have a chance to be here. And the reason why we're talking in terms of revival is because we are a church in need of revival. We are a church in need of revival spiritually. We're a church in need of revival in terms of organizationally. We're in need of revival in terms of how we practice what we do in ministry. I saw Cynthia Weems a minute ago, and I remember some years ago when her father was president at St. Paul School of Theology, one of the sermons, and I don't remember very many sermons 10 years after they were preached, but I remember this one. And one of the things he said is something I hinted at a moment ago. He said, we haven't approached the gospel that people desperately need. We haven't approached the gospel that will touch people's lives. We haven't approached the gospel that people will respond to. We haven't approached the gospel that will change the world if we could only remember it. And the problem is that we have a hard time remembering. We suffer a bit from amnesia. We've forgotten some things that were really important. And so my aim is to help remind you of some of these things. Why do I think we've forgotten those things? Well, because we look at the churches across the United States, across the connection. We have pockets where there's really vital churches that are growing like crazy. But we have a whole lot of churches that are struggling with no children in them, no teenagers, no young adults in these congregations. And of course, we know it's not just the United Methodist Church that's facing this. Right now, across the United States, in American Christianity, we find a decline in interest in the church among millennials. And you heard this in the recent Pew Center report, right? Many of you familiar with this, heard the information? And in the Pew Center report, we found that since the last time they had done this study, and they do this every year, the number of millennials that said that they were not involved in a faith community has risen from 16% to 23%. This is dramatic. And now, it's not that those 23% are saying, I'm not interested in God. In fact, 44% of them said that spirituality was somewhat important or very important in their lives. So God, spirituality, Jesus, these are things that are very important in their lives or somewhat important in their lives. They just have decided the church isn't necessarily the place to receive those things, to find those things, or to grow in these things, in their faith. I was listening this week to NPR, and there was in our local NPR station in Kansas City, there was a report that was done on this Pew Center report, on this study, and they invited callers to call in and say, you know, are you one of those people? And remember, it's not just millennials, it's also middle-aged people, and it's older adults who are checking out of the church. And so they said, if you're a part of that group that considers yourselves, you know, somewhat spiritual, but yet not interested in, you know, being a part of organized religion, call in and tell us why. And so I was very interested. In fact, I sat in the parking lot in my car just to finish listening to this story. And as I was listening, the first man who called in, he said, I used to go to church. I was interested. I believe in God. I really like Jesus. I want to follow him. But, I was taught in my more fundamentalist church that you had to decide between the Bible and science. That you couldn't accept the idea of evolution if you were going to be a Christian, because Genesis 1, 2, and 3 tells us not just that God created, but how God created. And he said, there came a point in college where I finally decided I can't do this anymore. I still believe in God, and I pray to him sometimes, and I believe in Jesus, but I just can't be a part of the church. And I just wanted to call in immediately and say, wait a minute, come visit the Methodist Church. That's not the way we teach. And then right after that, I heard a woman call in, and she described how she felt like her friends, she'd gone to a church, and they, had very strong views on homosexuality. And she said, I felt embarrassed to bring my friends to my church. And then I realized, I don't think I want to be a part of a church that talks about my friends this way anymore. And I checked out. She said, I pray to Jesus every day. I just am not interested in being with his people. And a third person, so this is just the first three. The third person called in and said, I just found I have this faith, and I do believe, but I went to church. It did nothing for my faith. I found it seemed boring, disconnected from my daily life. I didn't really feel that people were authentic around me, and I just decided I think I can do this on my own. I don't think I need to go to the building down on the corner in order to be spiritual. Now, you've heard this from people. Let me just ask a question. How many of your children or grandchildren, now I'm talking about adult children or grandchildren, no longer go to church? Would you raise your hands? Look around. I mean, there's a whole lot of us here, and we've got to figure this out if the gospel really matters to us. And my youngest daughter is one of those. She's 25 years old. She lives in New York City. And I pray every day, multiple times, that there would be some church that would welcome her, some Christian who would speak to her. Because I tried to talk to her, and she said, Dad, I can't talk to you about this. You're my dad. And you're my preacher. I can't talk about this. I'm like, well, who are you going to talk to about it then? And so I'm praying, who is she going to talk to about this? And I think a United Methodist Church might have the greatest likelihood of approaching her with a way of approaching the Christian gospel that my 25-year-old daughter might say, okay, this makes sense to me. And I think I want to be a part of a church like this. Now, again, we know that all Christian denominations are struggling. The Southern Baptists, for years they were eating our lunch, right? There was a point at which we were the largest Protestant denomination in America, and then, starting about 50 years ago, our mainline churches, including the United Methodist Church, began to decline, and the non-denominational as well as the conservative denominational churches began to take over. The Pentecostals, evangelical denominations, the Southern Baptists were really leading in that, and so they grew to be twice the size of the United Methodist Church over the last 50 years. As we were shrinking, they were increasing. Now last year, I want to give you these statistics first for our church and then the Southern Baptist Church. Last year, the most recent year for which we have statistics, the United Methodist Church in America declined by, now this is from one year to the next on any given Sunday, we declined by 68,000 people per weekend in worship attendance. 68,000. Now I don't know how many United Methodists worship in Florida in your annual conference on any given weekend, but I'm guessing it's somewhere around that number. So now this is in 2013, reported in 2014, the most recent statistics we have. This would be like closing every single United Methodist Church in the Florida annual conference in 1 year. How many years can we do that? And the answer is less than 40. Now, in 40 years, it's not that there's going to be no United Methodist churches left, because there are vital churches and they're going to be vital then, but what we're going to see is a huge number of our churches are going to be closed. Now, again, lest we think it's just us, this is a trend now in Christianity in America, so that last year, while we lost 68,000 people a weekend in worship attendance, the Southern Baptists lost 135,000 people a weekend in worship attendance. They've lost people 5 years in a row in worship attendance. I had no idea. They don't talk about it a whole lot. But 5 years in a row, they've been in decline. So something's happening, and we've got to figure out how we respond to that something that's happening in our broader culture and how we're going to reach new generations for Christ. Now, what's interesting is, again, for a lot of younger people, there's a sense in which what worked in the church in the 1980s and 1990s, the more conservative churches that were really just booming, and the Pentecostals and charismatics and all that, the younger generations are not attracted to that version of Christianity so much. And so, again, I think the picture of Christianity that we offer, if we remember it and we offer it with vitality and life, is one that many younger adults would be interested in if we could only present it with vitality and life. And here's what I notice when I talk to young people who don't go to church. Many of them are very interested in Jesus. It's just his people they're not that interested in. And so it's not, the problem isn't Jesus. The problem is the church. And we are the church. Now, people have asked me, why are mainline churches declining so much these days? And the Pew Center report noted that we are declining more rapidly than the others. Some of them are even, some of them are flat, some of them are declining just a little bit as a percentage. Why are United Methodists and the other mainline churches declining so rapidly? And this may sound like a trite answer, but the reality is that we have a base of people, our average age is around 60. Now, when your average age is 60, you're not reproducing yourself in the fun, old-fashioned way that is having babies. You are only going to grow the church if you're reaching out to new people. And so what's happening is, and you see this in your own congregations, is we have some of our most faithful United Methodist Christians are in their 80s and in their 90s. The oldest member of my church is 105. He's there every Sunday. He made a pledge in our last capital campaign, but he gave me the check up front, and he said, I'm not counting on the fact I'm going to be here 3 years from now to pay this off. And so, thank God we have, a base of people who are in their 80s and their 90s and some in their hundreds. But what that means is that over the next 20 years, we can see the handwriting on the wall unless you know what's going to happen. And so where are the people coming? So what I tell people is people aren't leaving the United Methodist Church. In the 70s and 80s, maybe they did. Today, people generally, we like the Methodist Church the way it is, which is part of the problem. We like it we finally got it just the way it is. We don't want to change anything. We like it the way it is. They're not leaving, they're graduating to God's eternal kingdom. And so the only way the church has a future is if we are finding out how to be the church for a new generation of people. We've got to figure this out. And so some of the things we're going to talk about today are going to be essential to this. Now, there are three critical pieces. So, as I look at churches that are growing or at least vital, and alive and churches that maybe aren't so much vital and alive, there are three differentiating factors between those that are dynamic or growing or vital or healthy and those that are not. And those three are effective leadership. And by the way, you should have an outline of this session in your conference workbook, or you received it when you walked in the door. I'd love for you to take notes. On the left-hand side is a little place to take notes. You can follow along with this outline. But here are the three things that we might mention. The key differences. First, effective leadership. The second is meaningful worship and preaching. The third is missional outreach to the community. And it just so happens those are the three talks I'm going to share with you today and tomorrow. The first one is on effective leadership. This one we're going to do now. Tomorrow morning we're going to talk about preaching and worship. And then the last session I'm going to have with you, we're going to talk about missional outreach to the community. Now, it's easy for some folks to say, and I travel across the country. I just came from Iowa, and then before that, West Michigan. And it's easy for people to say, well, you pastor this really big church in the suburbs. You know, what do you really know about little church, what church is like in our community? And you've never been here and done that. And it's right. I've never pastored a church in Florida. And the church that I pastor was small at one time. We started with 4 people, my wife and I and our 2 kids. And the church grew from there. The first year we had 90 people a Sunday in worship, and then we grew to 150, and then 220, and it just continued to grow. But I watch what's happening in other places. So I want to tell you a story of a couple of churches in central Missouri in communities that have been declining for the last 50 years. These are rural areas, and these 2 churches are Drake's Chapel and Calhoun United Methodist Churches. They're both over 125 years old. One of them is 180 years old now. And these 2 churches began growing several years back, about 6 years ago. And we sent a film crew there to find out, how are they growing? I mean, the people moved away. What can we learn from this, these 2 little churches? And so we began talking with Margie Briggs, who is the pastor of these churches. And what happened was about 7 or 8 years ago, the student local pastor they had didn't get along well with the church, and the bishop had to move the student local pastor. And so the bishop had nobody to send there. This is like in, say September. And so the district superintendent went to the district lay leader and said, Margie, we need your help. We need you to go serve Drake's Chapel in Calhoun. And she said, I've never been a pastor before. What do I know about pastor? I can't do that. And this DS said, look, all you got to do is love the people for several months. At Christmas, we'll finally find a pastor, but we just need you to go in and love them for 3 months. And she said, okay, I can go love the people. She drives 45 minutes each way, a businesswoman. She goes and shepherds these 2 congregations. Well, Margie Briggs is still there 7 years later. And when she got to Drake's Chapel had 7 people a Sunday in worship. Calhoun had 30 people a Sunday in worship. Today, Drake's Chapel, who had 7, now has 40 people a Sunday in worship. I want you to catch this. This is more than a 500% increase in worship attendance in 7 years. If every one of our United Methodist churches saw that happen, we'd have 40 million people a weekend in worship. So I want you to just picture this. Now, Calhoun had 30 people a Sunday, and today they run 75 people a Sunday, and occasionally bump up to 100. And I just wanted to know what happened. What did they do there? So I wanted you to hear what the people in the congregation and Margie had to say as they tried to understand what happened in their congregation. Take a listen.
Probably the lowest point that I can remember at this church, when we'd come out here and there would be 7 or 8 members here.
I kind of quit coming here at that time.
This is an old congregation. Our average attendance, probably the people were 80 years old.
As we was leaving and driving up the hill, going back to town, I thought to myself, why have I even bothered to come?
They were dying off one by one, and at some point we wouldn't have enough money to keep the doors open.
There was no hope. There was very little hope here. My district superintendent, Cody Collier, called me and said, Margie, we're really having trouble at Calhoun and Drake, and if you could go and help them through the Christmas season, that would be great. And I said, sure, I'd love to do that.
When Margie came, it was just like a new breath of life to us.
She helped me a lot when my mom died. She helped me a lot.
My friends started coming here, and they told me what a joy it was.
She's one of the best preachers that we've had out here at Drake, and she preaches from the heart.
She's a good example for us to follow, and we want to be like her, and we want to learn from her.
Margie is just one of those fantastic people that makes us proud to say we're United Methodist. The pastor encouraging us to step out on faith and do things that we wouldn't normally do.
I've been very pleased with the Angel Food Ministry, and we've been a part of bringing this affordable food to people in Calhoun and surrounding areas that they wouldn't have that opportunity. When you can share with someone the hope that Christ brings, it's energizing.
We're coming back to life, and we are alive again.
We'll never fill this church, or I don't think we will. But I would like to see that our congregation, that we'd have 35 or 40 every Sunday morning. And I think that's possible for us.
I love these people, and God is working through all of us to say, hey, this is my church, and I need this church to be here on this corner in Calhoun, and I need the church in Drake's Chapel to continue for another 173 years. I need these churches. And as God works through all of us, the energy that comes when you feel like you're a part of the kingdom of God is just something that can't be held back.
There were three things I noticed in this video as I was listening to what the lay people said there and what Margie said that it took to turn the church around. The first was effective leadership. The second was meaningful preaching and worship. And the third was missional outreach to the community. And here's what I'd want you to know. If it can happen in Drake's Chapel and Calhoun, it can happen anywhere. And so I am a person who has great hope for what God can do through our congregations, and I think God needs us and is counting on us. And so we're going to take a look at what effective leadership looks like today. Now, I want to recognize that most of you already know a lot about leadership because you've experienced it. Even if you're not a leader or you are beginning to be a leader, you've experienced leadership. You've worked for somebody, you had a boss, you had a coach, you had a mentor, you had a teacher. You've watched leadership in your local church with your pastors, superintendents, bishops. You look at presidents and other leaders. And so we see leadership, but we don't often think about, well, what makes for good leadership and bad leadership. So I'm going to ask you to write on your piece of paper 2 categories. You're going to make 2 headings, and then you're going to write words underneath those. The first one is bad leader, and the second one is good leader. Put a line underneath those. Bad leader, good leader. And then you're going to make a list of attributes. And so here's what I want you to think about from your own experience, and in silence, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. This isn't a lot of time. 30 seconds to think of the worst leaders you've ever known, like a horrible coach, a terrible teacher, a lousy pastor, or, well, you have no lousy pastors in Florida, but in the rest of the country, we have some once in a while. And so I want you to write down 3 or 4 things that lousy leaders do or what they're like that make them lousy. I do want you to write this down because I'm going to ask you to turn to one other person in 30 seconds and to share that with somebody else. I'll tell you when to do it, but right now you have 30 seconds to write down 3 or 4 practices or attributes of really lousy leaders. Ready? Go. Take your time. You've got 12 seconds. Okay, why don't you turn to one other person or 2, and I'd love for you to share with each other what's on your list of what makes for a lousy leader, all right? And you have 1 minute. $20 seconds. 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. By the way, I want to say hello to all of you who are joining us online as well. I know this is being live streamed, and I know there are people across the country and in other parts of the world who may be joining us today, and I want to say thank you for joining us as well here in Florida. Okay, so now I want you to turn to that second column and see the bad leader list helps you think about what makes for a good leader, right? I mean, in some ways you could almost say the exact opposite of everything on the first list is some of what you want to do, but there's other things as well. So what I want you to do is take 30 seconds in silence, and I want you to think about the best leader you ever had, the best boss, coach, pastor, teacher, mentor, political leaders. And I'd like for you to write down what are 3 or 4 practices or attributes or qualities of a really great leader. You have 30 seconds. Ten seconds. All right, now turn to one other person and 1 or 2 other people. You've got a minute to share what's on your list, and go ahead and, if something good is on somebody else's list, write it down on your list. What are the attributes, practices of a great leader? Five seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.5, 1.25, 1. Okay. So that was just to kind of get you warmed up to be thinking about leadership, because most of us know a lot more about leadership than what we realize if we just stop to reflect upon it. So I'd like to share with you some of the things on my list. We'll see if they're the same things that are on your list. And as I think about these, I share these often with young pastors. Some of your pastors who've come to our Leadership Institute in the past, I've shared these with them. So these are things that I think are really essential for being an effective leader. Here's the first one. Ready? Effective leaders brush their teeth. So we could go on. They wear deodorant. They know that white tube socks don't go with dress suits. They don't fold their clothes up in a wad and a bundle on the floor and then put them on, with crinkles all over in them and wear them to important meetings, weddings, or anything like that. And so, we laugh about that just a little bit. But my dentist, Lori Engelman, told me the story of how when she had just got out of dental school, she was practicing in a small town. She went to a Methodist church, and her pastor was also one of her patients. And he would come in, and when he'd come in, it was obvious when she began to clean his teeth that he never brushed his teeth, or very seldom brushed his teeth. And she said, it was so hard for me to sit in the pew and to listen to this man preach, offering me wisdom about life, when he didn't get the simplest of things right, when it came to dental hygiene. And I've had people say the same thing, my pastor doesn't smell very good, or my pastor, dresses poorly, or whatever. And here's the thing, lay people want to be proud enough of their pastor that they're not embarrassed to invite their friends to come to church. They want to be able to introduce their pastor, in groups, and to be proud that this is their pastor. And this isn't just true of lay people, it's true of Sunday school members in a Sunday school class, the UMW of the women's president, of the youth group of the youth director. And so this is just one of those simple, tiny little things, but we have to take care of ourselves. It starts here. Okay, number 2 is authentic. Integrity, we could use that word. And I remember talking with a pastor in Texas years ago. He was the executive pastor of a really large Southern Baptist church. And I said, tell me about your senior pastor. And I've never forgotten what he said. He said, the people who know my senior pastor the best respect him the most. The people who know my senior pastor the best respect him the most. When it comes to leadership, wherever you're a leader, in government or in the private sector or in the business world or in the local church, you want people to say, you want the people who know you the best to say, they're the real deal. They're the same person when they step away from the pulpit that they are when they're standing in the pulpit. Okay, so number 3, great leaders initiate conversations. So if you're in leadership, you are in a role in which you have to be a people person. Now, here's the challenging thing for many of us who are preachers, is that in lay people, this may be surprising to you, but many people who feel called to ordained ministry are introverts. And they're introverts because they're interested in the spiritual life, in the interior life. And so they're drawn to this field where they can, practice this for a living. I mean, they get to do this. But the thing is that if you're an introvert, nothing wrong with being an introvert. Lots of great, beautiful gifts in being an introvert. But if you're an introvert, being around people drains you. And so sometimes we tend to sort of keep to ourselves a little bit. And here's one of the things I've noted about some of our associate pastors over the years is some of them, they walk down the hallway at church and they look at their feet as they're walking down the hallway. Now, there's lay people all around, but they look at their feet because they don't want to have to talk. Like there's certain things where they know they have to talk, but here they don't want to have to talk. And so I have to sit down with them and I have to say, look, you're in a people job here. You've got to make eye contact. You've got to initiate conversations. And I learned this from my senior pastor. I'm borderline introvert. And I learned this from my senior pastor when I was in seminary. And Bob Robertson wasn't the best preacher in the whole world, but he was a great people person. And when he would walk down the corridors of New World United Methodist Church in Garland, Texas, if there was a lay person who was getting ready for Sunday school in the Sunday school class, maybe they came in on Friday to get ready, and he'd walk by. He might be late for a meeting, but he saw someone in the room, and he'd always go in the room. He'd stop what he was doing, and he'd look them in the eyes, and he'd just say, thank you so much for what you're doing here. It really matters. And he would leave people feeling encouraged when he walked away. And so this is one of those things we've got to do. And here's a little piece of concrete advice I want to give you. If you are an introvert and you work in the church or you're in leadership in the church, before you go to the church, I want you to take 3 shots of espresso. Or if you don't like espresso, try a Mountain Dew and a bag of dark chocolate M&Ms. Anything that's going to give you just a little more juice as you get up there. And this is true if you're a liturgist and you're reading scripture. I mean, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. Okay. Number 4. Leaders constantly encourage other people. Leaders constantly encourage other people. And so my example for this is something that happened several years back. It happens all the time for me, but this was a pretty good example. I was going to pay for gas at the gas station next to the church. It's called Zips, and I went in there to pay for gas, and I was going to get something to drink before I came to the register. There were 3 or 4 people lined up, and it was clear the woman at the cash register was having a very bad day. She was rude to the people. She was slamming the cash register door shut. She just was not very nice, and you had to brace yourself as you were going up there to the register. I was just like trying to, prepare for this. And then in my mind, I felt like the Spirit said to me, I wonder why she's so upset today. And so I then began to make up a narrative in my mind of why she was upset, because that helped me have compassion for her, right? Otherwise, I was just going to be, maybe say something rude. But instead, I began thinking, okay, I bet she has a child at home. She's a single mom. I bet she has a child at home that's sick today. And I bet she gets paid minimum wage working at Zips gas station. And I'm wondering when the last time was that her boss paid her a compliment or ever said anything nice to her. And I wonder how many rude customers she's had today. So by the time I got up to the register, the other thing I said was, what's one nice thing you can say to her? And so I began to look, what's something nice I can say? And I looked at her glasses. I'm a glasses guy. If you wear glasses, you notice other people's glasses. And so I looked at her glasses. I thought, well, those are kind of nice. And so when I got to the register, before she could say anything, I said, I really like your glasses. Where'd you get those? Just stopped her in her tracks. And she said, well, I got them at Target. I said, well, those are really pretty glasses. I'll have to go check out their glasses. She said, well, thank you. I said, I want to say one other thing to you. I just want to thank you for being here behind the cash register. Because you're here, I can fill up my car with gas, and I can come in and get something to drink, and I'm going to go about my way. But that only is possible because you're standing back here, helping the rest of us. And I don't know when the last time was somebody said thank you, but I just want to say, I really appreciate what you do. Thank you. And tears began to well up in her eyes, and her lower lip began to quiver as we were standing there talking. And she said, that's the first nice thing somebody said to me in I don't know how long. And so, I thanked her, she thanked me. I began to walk out the door, and then I listened as she waited on the next 3 customers. I just stood there by the door listening. And for each one, how are you today? Thank you for coming into Zips today. Everything changed because one person was willing to offer a word of encouragement. And here's what I found is that people are willing to follow people who offer encouragement to them. A lot of people around you are discouraged. When you offer encouragement, people are willing to listen. By the way, look at people's name tags. Try to remember people's names when you see them, whether they're a wait person or the flight attendant on the airplane. All right. I love this one. Benjamin Zander taught me this. He is I think he still is, the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. Some of you may have heard him speak on leadership. When he went to Boston to the symphony, there was, they were bleeding red, they were struggling, and then he turned it around. And he says, it's interesting, a lot you can learn from Philharmonic directors, symphony conductors. And he said, one thing he'd noticed is that a lot of symphony conductors are pretty demoralized today. And the reason is because, only a small percentage of the population listens to classical music anymore. The schools are no longer, many of the schools are having to cut back on the music programs. And a lot of the symphonies are struggling. So he says there's 2 kinds of leaders, symphony conductors. He said the one kind, if you can give me the iPad. He said the one kind are what he calls downward spiral thinkers. And these people get together or with their musicians, and they continually talk about everything that's wrong with the music world and the symphony. People hate, good music. They listen to this horrible rock and roll music, and the schools aren't teaching anymore. They don't care about us, and things are horrible, and they're going to get worse, and nobody likes us. Everybody hates us. Guess we'll go eat worms. I mean, this is kind of the mentality. And here's the thing, he says, people kind of like to lament with each other for a little while. They like to complain with each other for a little while, but very few people want their leader to be a complainer and a lamenter. And here's, my experience as United Methodist and in my own life, I find it much easier to complain and lament than to celebrate and to talk about, to talk positively about things. I have led the group of the 100 largest pastors in the not the 100 largest pastors, the pastors of the 100 largest churches in Methodism, kind of an informal group, and we started getting together about 10 years ago, maybe not quite that long ago. And one of the things that was interesting when we first started meeting was how easy it was for us to go into the lamenting. And we lamented the bishops. If only we had better bishops, if only we had better seminaries, if only we had better general boards and agencies, or some said no general boards and agencies, if only we didn't have apportionments, if only there weren't, and it went on and on and on with the lamenting. And the thing is, it's easy to step into that, but when you are a leader and you're lamenting all the time, people might lament with you for a little while and then they're not going to follow you. See, what people are desperately looking for is leaders who have hope for a future that's different than the present. And so this is what Benjamin Zander said. He had this picture. He said there's another kind of symphony conductor, and he says these symphony conductors radiate possibility. He said they look at the same exact situation that the first symphony conductors look at, and they say, 95% of the people don't listen to classical music anymore. That means we only have 5% of the population, but we've got a 95% untapped market out there. My gosh, how awesome is that? And so they radiate possibility. Yeah, the schools aren't offering music programs like they used to. So how about if we as symphony members volunteered one time a month to go into each of the elementary schools in our city to teach music to people? What if everybody listens to rock and roll? What if we scheduled a pop series where we bring in rock and roll artists to sing with the symphony? You see how they think? They're seeing possibilities where other people are only seeing the negative. And people long to follow other people who have hope for the future. And so I want to ask you, which of these two do you find yourself most easily drawn towards? The downward spiral thinking or the radiating possibility kind of thinking? And the reality is, for me, I'm drawn to, by nature, I become the downward spiral thinker. I have to force myself. I have to decide every day that I am going to radiate possibility and hope. I keep telling people, I believe that our best years could be ahead of us as United Methodists. I keep saying it. People say, come on, you don't really believe that, do you? I mean, look at the facts, man. Surely you don't believe that. And I say, I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. I believe it's possible, and I'm going to keep saying it until I think, we're going to do everything we can to see that happen. Quickly, just a couple of other things. So they're positive, they radiate possibility, they're passionate, they're courageous, they're humble. So there's a lot of other things that are on your list that we could add to this. Here's the best piece of advice I'm going to give you in our 24 hours together. Are you ready? Okay. All the stuff on the bad leader list, don't do that. And the stuff on the good leader list, do more of that, right? I mean, we know this already. You don't need a guy from Kansas City to tell you this, but sometimes we need to be reminded of these things. Now, often leadership is not taught so much as caught, which is kind of what we just saw. You watch a leader and then you say, I wonder what I can learn from what they just did. I liked that. I wonder what I can learn from it. So I thought I'd just give you an example of this, how you catch leadership more than it's just, somebody tells you about it. So what I'm about to show you is a video clip from Church of the Resurrection. It's from about, 5 years ago or so. From our Saturday evening worship service. There was about 2,500 people there in worship in the Saturday evening service. And I want you to watch carefully what I do here to see, well, what is the leadership lesson from what Adam just does in this video clip, all right? So take a look. What name is given this child? Tara Lynn Cook. I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son. There we go. And of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And with this oil I anoint you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And may God's Holy Spirit fill you today that you might grow up to be a great woman of faith. Amen. Amen. Now, this little girl is going to need your love and care. She's going to need your encouragement and your prayers. She's going to need you to be her church family. I ask you, will you do these things? Very good. Let's pray together. Lord, bless this food. Bless this food. Oh my gosh. Can we start over? So, what's the leadership lesson here? Right? Be able to laugh at yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. You're not always going to get it right. And, the thing is, people love to follow imperfect leaders. They love to follow leaders who know that they're imperfect. They love to follow leaders who don't think they're all that. They love to follow leaders who are willing to laugh at themselves. Be a leader who can laugh at yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. I take the call of Jesus really, really seriously. But I don't take myself very seriously, and I hope you don't either. All right, so let's talk about what leaders do. And I want to mention 5 things really briefly, really 6. I'm going to say this one way, and then I'm going to offer it to you a second way in just a moment. So you'll want to fill in the blanks. Leaders set the tone of the organization. Leaders set the tone of the organization. And this is why this thing about being negative and downward spiral thinking, you know what, if your Sunday school teacher is negative all the time, what can you tell me about your Sunday school class after a year? Whole bunch of complainers and negative people, right? If your youth director is passionate about missions, what can you tell me about the youth group after they are going to be passionate about missions, right? If your pastor is really friendly and always looking to see the new people and shaking their hands, what can you tell me about the congregation after a year? See, you get this already. You set the tone of what's going on. When you're in leadership, you're setting the tone by your words and by your example. All right, number 2, leaders clarify and champion the mission and vision. Leaders clarify and champion the mission and vision. These are 2 really essential ideas, mission and vision. We'll talk more about those in just a moment, and what mission means and what vision means and why it's important in your ministry and in your congregation. In every business, every entity, mission and vision are critical. Number 3, leaders hold the organization, again, youth group, women's group, church, annual conference, whatever it is, they hold the organization accountable to accomplish the mission. The buck stops with the leader. I'm responsible. You're responsible for whatever it is you're a leader in. We're responsible as a church council for our church. The pastor is responsible. Okay, hold the organization accountable to accomplish the mission. Number 4, leaders are responsible for preparing the organization for the future by leading change. Responsible for preparing our church, our small group, our Sunday school, whatever it is for the future by leading change. Now, it's here I want to pause and recognize how important this really is. By nature, we as human beings are resistant to change, right? I used to think I loved change. Change is my middle name. I love change. I thrive on it. And then one day, 2 of my staff members came to me and said, we really want to make this change at the church. And I gave them 10 reasons why we shouldn't make the change. And then I realized after they left, I only like the changes I initiate. And this is the way it is for everybody. There's a church in Kansas City, one of our biggest leading churches in the city, not United Methodist, but some years ago they brought in a consultant. They had been declining, slowly declining for years. They brought in a consultant. The consultant recommended 48 different changes that they thought needed to be made in the church for it to be vital for the next generation. They took the report. The church studied it for a year. At the end of the year, there was only one change they implemented. All of the others, they found some reason why they couldn't implement it. And this is one of the best consultants, church consultants in the country. And the only change they implemented was they changed the font on their bulletins. We don't like change, which is why you need leaders to be able to, why leaders have to be able to drive change. So some of you have read John Cotter's work. He was at Harvard Business School for many years. He's written a number of books on change. And one of the things he's most famous for is writing about the difference between managers and leaders. And so I'd love for you to write these things down. I'm going to give you 4 things that managers do, he says. These are things managers are supposed to do. It's what they do well. These are 4 things that leaders must do. So you might write them on your piece of paper there. And I'll read them once, then I'll read them a second time, and then I'll close by reading them a third time. Managers plan and budget. And then what I'm about to tell you that leaders do is sort of contrasted with what managers do. By the way, before I go on, he said that the average American company is overmanaged and underled. Okay, so we'll think about whether the United Methodist Church fits that or not in just a moment. Managers plan and budget. Leaders establish direction and cast vision. We're going that way. God is calling us to go there. That's the promised land. This is what it's going to look like. All right, plan and budget, managers do. Leaders establish direction, cast vision. Managers develop policies and procedures. They develop policies and procedures. On the other hand, leaders align people and resources to accomplish a vision. They align people and resources to accomplish a vision. So managers develop policies and procedures. That's important. There's nothing wrong with that. Leaders align people and resources to accomplish a vision. Managers control and problem solve. Control and problem solve, very important work. Leaders, on the other hand, motivate and inspire. So managers control and problem solve. Leaders motivate and inspire. This is my favorite one. Managers create predictability and order. Let me say it again. Managers create predictability and order. This can be really, really important. Now listen to what leaders do, Cotter says. Leaders create chaos and change. Now, I'll ask you, so let me just read it one more time. Managers plan a budget, leaders establish direction and cast vision. Managers develop policies and procedures. Leaders align people and resources to accomplish a vision. Managers control and problem solve. Leaders motivate and inspire. Managers create predictability and order. Leaders create chaos and change. You are electing delegates to go to General Conference. Let me just ask you, what does General Conference do? 8 of its 9.5 days is spent perfecting the discipline. All right. What we're going to do for those 9 days, I'm going as well, is we're going to plan and budget, develop policies and procedures, control and problem solve, and create predictability and order. And we're going to spend about a half a day establishing direction and casting vision, aligning people and resources to accomplish a vision, motivated and inspiring, and I don't think we want to create chaos and change, do we? No, we better not touch that one. Do you think, how many of you believe the average United Methodist Church and the denomination as a whole is, like Cotter says of American businesses, overmanaged and underled? Let's see a show of hands. All right. Okay, so your church may not be this way, but for many of us, this is what happens. We'll talk more about leading change in a moment. Number 5, managers. Number 5, leaders evaluate, they celebrate victories, and honestly address shortcomings. That's the blank, shortcomings. We've got to do both of these. We've got to celebrate victories. I find I'm in such a hurry all the time, I don't take the time to go back and say to people, thank you for what you did, that was awesome. You know, 2 words that every leader needs to say multiple times every week, thank you. Thank you. I noticed what you did. Thank you. It's handwritten notes, it's calling people on the phone, it's texting them, Facebook. And did you know that Sarah did this week and it was awesome? We got to celebrate. But we also have to honestly address shortcomings. And here's the thing about us as Christians is we like to be nice. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. And so in order not to hurt people's feelings, somebody does a really horrible job reading Scripture every week, and it's just everybody feels like it's somebody scratching their fingers on a chalkboard. but nobody's willing to tell the person this, right? And they think they're doing a fine job. And nobody's willing to coach them and say, I think we could do this a little better, or give them a promotion to be doing something else during the worship hour as opposed to reading Scripture. But here's the thing, the church doesn't exist to give that person an opportunity to read Scripture. The church exists to be the body of Christ, and we want to make sure that when new people come in, they don't feel like somebody's scratching their fingers on a chalkboard when the person's reading Scripture, or whatever else it might be. And so we've got to be willing to be honest with people and to strive to give God our very best. And so that means honestly addressing shortcomings. Okay, one thing that leaders don't do is they don't give up. They don't give up. Leaders who change the world don't give up. They feel like giving up on a regular basis. And here's the reason why they feel like giving up is if you're in leadership, then all the folks who are following, at least some of them, like to criticize you. This is a part of leadership. If you're going to be a Sunday school teacher, people are not going to like this curriculum you picked out. If you're going to head up the UMW, people aren't going to like the way you're doing it. And sometimes they're right. So you've got to be willing to listen to see, how can I improve? Is this person telling me something? And at least they're honest enough to tell me, even if I don't like how they told me. So you're constantly listening to the criticism to see, is there something you need to learn from it? But you aren't dissuaded from moving forward by virtue of the fact that people criticize you. And so when I think about this, I think about examples of this. Moses is a great example of this, right? You remember the story. He's just led the children of Israel through the Red Sea, into the wilderness, and they're on their way to the Promised Land. And after a while, the people began to complain. Do you remember this? They started complaining because they didn't like the food. And they said, it's hard to believe this, but they actually said, at least we had cucumbers and leeks and meat pots back in Egypt. Let's go back to Egypt. And then they had a secret staff parish committee meeting. And they tried to vote Moses off the island, right? And you remember how Moses responded? This is literally in the Bible. He goes out to the wilderness by himself to pray, and he says, God, kill me now. Just kill me now. I don't want to lead these people anymore. It is too hard. I want to say, this is true for all leaders, but I want to say that this is particularly true for pastors. And it's true for pastors in part because you've got a whole congregation of people who are non-paid staff, a number of whom believe that they could do it better if they were doing it. And sometimes they could, but then quit your job, go to seminary, and come over and take over. But no, I didn't really mean that. But here's the thing, again, sometimes you might have the right thing to say. You might have the right criticism. Your pastor may need to get better in this area or that area. But I want you to just remember the fundamental teaching Jesus said captured the law and the prophets. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That means that you find a way of expressing your concern in a way that's healthy and productive and not anonymous letters that you send to your pastor. It means that you really do want to help them get better and not just get something off your chest and just blast them. I'm saying this as somebody who gets these kind of letters all the time. And I can handle it. But what I know is that there are pastors for whom they're right on the edge of just saying, you know what, forget it. I don't want to do this anymore. It just is too hard. I'm sick of it. Nobody in Florida, I'm sure, but in Kansas there are some pastors like that who feel this way. And I remember some years ago I felt this way. I'm a pretty positive guy most of the time, but I preached a sermon in 2004 that really upset some of the people in my congregation. And I was trying to hear from God, and I was trying to express what was going on in my own heart and what I felt like God was saying to me, and I preached the sermon, and it upset a lot of people. And 800 people left the church in the next 8 months. Now, even in a church, we have 22,000 adults and children who are part of Resurrection today. Back then, we had about 16,000, and maybe not even that many, 15, 14,000. But even with 14,800 people leaving is a really big loss. And if they'd all left on one Sunday, it might have been okay. But instead, they dribbled out over the course of a year, and I would get these letters, I'm so disappointed in you, Pastor Adam. I don't feel like I can trust you anymore with how you teach the Scriptures because of what you said in this sermon. I'm like, I led you to faith in Jesus. I baptized you. Do you remember when I showed up at 2 a.m. to visit your mom in the hospital? And you're going to leave because you don't agree with something I said in one sermon? Seriously? And, and I spent a lot of time soul searching. God, did I get it wrong? Maybe I did. Maybe I got it wrong. I'm sorry, God, if I got it wrong. I'm so sorry. And so going through this thing, but the thing is, pastors, when you're in that place, you show up at work and it's like, how you doing, Pastor Adam? I'm doing great. How about you? Because you got to be that way. You're not going to bleed all over everybody. You got to be positive, even when you feel hurt inside. And then you got to figure out, who can I talk to about this? And then how do I not become critical of other people? I'm not going to start saying bad things about other people. Right? I need my integrity intact. And so, you go through this process. And I remember one night, it was 6 months in. Now, at this point, we were serving Resurrection had become the largest church in Methodism by worship attendance in the U.S. And so where are they going to move me to, right? And my plan was to stay there. I really wanted to stay there for the rest of my ministry. But at this point, I remember it was the middle of winter. We live on a little acreage, and we had a couple horses. And my wife and I are out mucking out the stalls in the barn. It's like 9 o'clock at night and 20 degrees out. And we're mucking out the horse manure. And I turned to my wife and I said, I can't do this for 25 more years. Are you okay if I go somewhere else? Because it hurts too much. And our whole family's right in Kansas City. And at that time I was getting job offers for, seminary presidencies and they're not offers, but, people saying, we'd love for you to come here. Would you please consider it? And my wife said this to me. She said, of course I will go with you wherever God calls you to go. I just want to know that God has called you and you're not running away. And the truth was, I didn't feel God calling me. I just was running away. It hurt. And so I kept suiting up and showing up and praying and saying, God, please perfect me and use this painful time to bring something good from it and help me to be the best pastor I can be and lead and guide me. And over the next 12 months, 1,300 new people joined the church. And over the next 12 months, amazing things began to happen. And anyway, about 7 months after that moment in the barn, I woke up one day and I felt joy again in my ministry. And I felt excited to go back to work. And I will tell you, had I left Church of the Resurrection in 2004, 11 years ago, I would have missed out on most of the most exciting experiences of my ministry had I run away instead of answering God's call. The reason why I'm saying this is that there are some of you sitting in this room, and some of you are pastors, some of you this is in the workplace, and you feel like giving up right now. And it may be God is calling you somewhere else, but it may be God isn't calling you somewhere else. But instead, God is going to use these painful things that have happened to perfect you and shape you, and don't give up. And I think about this John Wesley. How many times in his ministry did people lampoon him on the front page of the local newspaper? One time he was preaching, this is all stuff in my book Revival, you'll see tomorrow, I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but he was preaching on the steps in this one particular town at the Market Cross, and a couple of people came behind him while he was preaching and unloaded a bag of manure on his head. Any of you pastors ever had that happen yet? One day he was taking a nap between preaching here and preaching there. He was taking a nap in a house and somebody lit the front porch of the house on fire. Anybody had that happen? They'd throw rocks at him and rotten eggs and all kinds of stuff. And he was like the Energizer Bunny. He just kept going and going and going. And here's what is important for us to remember. The people who change the world, that God uses to change the world, are the people who don't quit and they don't give up when things are difficult. And I want to encourage you to hang in there. All right. So I got a little more time with you. I want you to just stand up you have 60 seconds. I want you to stand up, stretch your legs, and I want you to turn to one other person and say, here's the most important thing I've heard so far today. All right? 60 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, take a seat. All right. So, this is where we climax our talk together, and I want to mention 5 key leadership principles. Now, the section on unleashing the laity, we're moving to session 3, so just know that's coming in session 3. 5 key leadership principles. Here's the first one. It's all about people. It's all about people. You can have all the answers, you can have the best theology, you can know the Bible backwards and forwards, but if you don't have good people skills, you are not going to be an effective leader. EQ is really, really important. And so, you know this, and I'm going to mention this in the last session again. People generally don't come to faith because of your superior theological arguments. People come to faith because you love them and you invest in them and they respect you and they recognize that you're somebody that they would like to be like. It's all about people. Now, all of the things I'm about to share, we're going to give you examples of in the next tomorrow's sessions. Number 2, healthy organizations have a clear MVP. MVP. That's not a most valuable player. M is mission, V is vision, and P is plan. Healthy organizations have a clear mission, vision, and plan. What is a mission? A mission answers the question, why are we here? And so, at the fundamental level, as a denomination, our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Now, you could just take that and port it right into your local church and say, this is our mission. At Church of the Resurrection, we have a slightly different mission statement. 25 years ago, we put it in place when we started the church. Our mission, or we call it our purpose, is to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. It's a 3-point sermon. To build a Christian community, what do Christian communities do? What do they like? What are the qualities of a Christian community? Non-religious and nominally religious people are our primary audience. We're not trying to steal people from the Baptists, the Pentecostals, or the other Methodist churches. We started to reach non-religious and nominally religious people, and our aim is to turn all of the folks who worship with us into deeply committed Christians. So what does a deeply committed Christian look like? You can see how you can begin to parse this and really think about it. A great mission statement fits on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker. Ours is almost too long. A 3rd or 4th grader should be able to get the general sense of it. Your people should be able to memorize it. Within 3 years of joining the church or you being there for 3 years, you say it over and over again. I say it at least once a month at Church of the Resurrection. It's in 20-inch letters in our narthex wall. Every committee that we have, the top of the agenda for every committee meeting, it says this: our aim in this meeting is to do everything our group can do to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. We have coffee with the pastors, which is how people join the church. We had 303 people join last month. Those people who joined the church, we told them there are 1,400 churches in Kansas City. This is what drives this church. We're here to build a Christian community. I put it up on the screen, to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. If that doesn't excite you, if you don't agree with that, I'm just going to ask you right now, please don't join this church, because that drives everything we do. It's how we budget. It's how we set up staffing. It's how we decide on our buildings. It's all built around that mission. So being clear about your mission. Okay, Kansas City is home to a greeting cards company. You may have heard of them, Hallmark Cards, right? So Hallmark Cards, this is just to give you an example of mission statement. You know the mission of Hallmark Cards? Right? You might say, well, to sell the most number of greeting cards, to be a leader in the greeting card industry, or some people say, well, when you care enough to send the very best, but that's a marketing slogan, not a mission statement. Here's the mission of Hallmark Cards. It's 3 words: to enrich lives. That's the mission of Hallmark Cards, to enrich lives. And so everyone who works there is meant to know you come to work to enrich people's lives. Now, we sell greeting cards today, they'll tell you, but in 50 years, we may not sell greeting cards at all. People may not send stuff through the mail anymore. So we might do digital greeting cards, or they do all kinds of other things, like prepare Hallmark Hall of Fame movies, So anyway, I want you to see if you can, catch Hallmark's mission in this TV spot from Hallmark Cards. Take a look.
Hey, Charlie.
These are for you.
Hi, Charlie.
Hey, Jake.
I have seen it take forever. I have seen it take for years. I've seen it every time you hide your tears.
It's hard being all alone, I guess.
Oh, I and wondered what to do, but I can't let it go like that. Oh, I'll be there for you.
Hey, Mom, this is Kavanaugh gave me this stuff for you. I think she was crying.
You know, I've seen that commercial 100 times. It makes me cry every stinking time I watch it. And here's the thing. If a greeting card company's commercial can make us cry and move us, what is the body of Christ meant to do? Right? If we were clear about our mission, you know, I just am wondering, don't raise your hands, but could you tell me, if I meet you out in the hallway and I say, tell me the mission of your particular congregation, could you tell me? And if you could tell me, does it excite you? Does it move you? Does it lead you to a place? Because see, for me, at Church of the Resurrection, I needed us to find a mission statement for which I would be willing to lay down my life. And that may sound dramatic. You know, I hope it doesn't ever come to that. But I can tell you, I will give my life, I will have given most of my life to building a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. I want to know that your mission at your local church is one that you would be willing to sacrifice for, to give yourself, to pour yourself into. Vision. Vision answers the question, where are we going? And when we talk about vision and where we're going, what we're doing is we're trying to paint a picture for people of what the future could look like if we live out our mission over a certain period of time. And so typically, you know, if you're talking about a year from now, we talk about goals. But goals and vision are very, very similar. Vision might be 3 years out or 5 years out, but it's a picture of something that doesn't yet exist, but it could be. It's a preferred picture of the future. And so what I find is that people are drawn to vision. They love vision. You know, people will only write out a check for so much to pay the light bills at your church. But when you give them a vision of how the world could be changed, they're going to be willing to give selflessly, sacrificially to those kind of visions. So I think about this, and an example of this in our congregation was some years ago I traveled to Malawi in southern Africa, had a chance to meet with tribal chiefs across the country and just ask them with a team of our folks, you know, tell me what might we be able to do in partnership with you in ministry here. And I remember there was a group of 4 tribal chiefs who met with us at one place, and they said, well, walk with us. And we walked down this dusty road, probably a mile and a half down the road, to a stream where the water came from for the village. And the stream was a sort of murky, greenish, brownish water. And they said, this is where our children drink from. This is where we get our cooking water and our cleaning water. And you know, there were people walking by with 5-gallon buckets on their heads. And they said, you know, we wish that we could have a borehole, a deep water well here in our town. And that was a pretty simple thing. You know, there's who in the world in their right mind isn't going to go back and say, we got to do this? And so I came back to our congregation. I said, I think there are 20 communities where we could be building, digging boreholes with the people who are over here. And the cost to, you know, some of these are inexpensive, but some of them are more expensive. And the cost for the deep boreholes in order to supply a community of about 10,000 people is about $9,000. So I said, you know, I'd like for us to do 20 of these if we can over a period of time. Let's start with 10. And the people got excited about that. Well, we have 4 campuses, and at our west campus, there was a little boy named Cooper who was there, and he was probably 9 years old at the time, and he was sitting in church, and he'd heard about Pastor Molly, who led that campus, and how her mom had gone to Malawi, and he heard about this vision. Now, Cooper had never heard of Malawi. He didn't know where it was. He really, you know, but he saw pictures of these kids and what was going on, and Cooper decided to do something about it, and he started collecting money door to door to build a well. And his vision became that I want to build one of those boreholes, a 9-year-old kid. So I want you to hear in his own words. Now, he was pretty nervous when we put him in front of the camera, and this was about 2 years after this whole thing had started. Take a listen. Cooper Crockett.
I was in church, and my dad told me about how Pastor Molly was talking about her mom in Malawi and about all the things happening there, and it made me want to start doing a charity for Malawi. I was trying to think of ideas for fundraisers, and I was in the car, and my mom said, well, how about we collect change? So I came up with some flyers. We went out and started passing out the flyers with bags on them. My 2 brothers, Carson and Corbin, they helped me a lot, and We went back the next Saturday and we raised like $150. People like it when kids do this kind of thing. It's not like kids can't do it. Kids can do it. I want to raise more money, and when I get enough to get a well in Malawi, because that's my goal, I want to go to Malawi and see them get water from it and see their smiles.
So I saw Cooper and his mom it was earlier this spring, and I said to Cooper, hey Cooper, hey, let's clap for him, that's awesome. So I said to Cooper, now this has been 4 years that he's been working on this. I said, Cooper, tell me how you doing on, he set up this website, Change for Malawi, the whole thing. I said, how you doing on collecting money for one of those wells? He said, I've raised over $9,000, Pastor Adam. So a 9-year-old kid, now he's 13, and he's raised over $9,000 to drill a deep water borehole in Malawi. And usually we don't let people go under the age of 16 to Malawi with us, but we invited him with his mom to join us on our Malawi trip next year so he can see one of those deep boreholes that he made possible in Malawi. And here's the thing, here's a kid who'd never been to Malawi, never heard of Malawi, but you see the power of vision. Here's a need, and here's what we hope to do. And a 9-year-old kid gives the next 4 years of his life to raising money for this. Ron Heifetz wrote a book several years ago. He also, if you can give me the iPad back, he also taught at Harvard at the Kennedy School. And when you think about vision, he said that part of what you're thinking of is, what is the world supposed to be like? Now, Jesus called this the kingdom of God. And then you look at what does the world actually look like, and vision is found in the difference between these two. The job of a leader is to close the gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be. Tell me, in your community, where does the world not yet look like the kingdom of God? And this is ripe for vision. It's ripe for you to say, you know what, here's a place where we can make a difference as a community of faith. There's only 20 of us in church here every Sunday. But you know what, we 20 can change the world for this group of people by doing this thing. And if one 9-year-old can raise $9,000, surely 20 adults can have a huge impact on the world. So this is what the power of vision. The last thing is to have a plan. And a plan, I was thinking about, I drove to Des Moines, Iowa the other day. I think I'd driven there once a long time ago. I was speaking at their annual conference. And so I knew what my mission was in going there, and I knew the vision of what I hoped would happen among the people of the Iowa Annual Conference, but I needed a plan on how to get there. And so I went to Google Maps, printed off a step-by-step plan, and then I brought it up on my phone as well. And this is sort of what this is why you need a plan. You can have a vision, but you got to go, okay, this month we got to do this, and next month we got to do that. And what you develop is SMART goals. Many of you in the business world know what these are, but if you're not familiar with them, SMART goals: specific, measurable. I changed the A. Some people say attainable. That's just the same as the R. Ambitious. Specific, measurable, ambitious, realistic, and time-sensitive, or time-specific. And so, a goal should be all those things. By February of 2016, we will have done these things, and you'll be able to measure it in this way. And these are the kinds of things that we as churches need to come up with. How many of you have at least 2 church-wide goals between now and next year? Would you raise your hands? It looks to me like about 3% of the churches in the room. So part of what I'd encourage you, this is our job of our church council, is strategically planning for the coming year what we're going to do. And I just say, come up with one goal. And your goal can't be, let's paint the women's bathroom. It's got to be something bigger than that. All right, so number 3, we're almost finished. Number 3, change. Oh, by the way, vision unifies a congregation and it energizes a congregation. It's just that important. Okay, number 3, change, innovate, improve, or die. All right, change, innovate, improve, or die. This is a fundamental leadership principle. Change, innovate, improve, or die. Remember, this goes back to what leaders do. They lead change. So I'll just give you a quick example of this. This is how I used to listen to music when I was a kid, right? How about you? So I used to listen to this. This is Elvis Aloha from Hawaii via satellite. So there was a pastor who, I shared this story, and this pastor said, yeah, I held up a record to my kids. This has been 5 or 6 years ago, to my children in the children's room. And I said, do you kids know what this is? And one of the kids said, yeah, that's a CD for old people. Can I, just to make this crystal clear, that the babies who are being born right now, 5 years from now will not know what a CD is, right? So eventually, records, the thing with records, you couldn't play them in your car very easily. They warped and they got scratched, and so a new technology came out called the 8-track tape, Elvis Aloha from Hawaii. Now, you remember, you just played your favorite song, and then you wanted to listen to it again. What'd you have to do? Do you remember this? Right, you had to change tracks, fast forward, change tracks, and you hope you landed approximately where the song began, right? Some of you have no idea what we're talking about, but Elvis Aloha. And the cool thing about this, you could have a shoebox. I remember getting in my 68 Chevelle Malibu, I pulled out the AM/FM Delco radio, put in an AM/FM 8-track, had a shoebox with 10 of these in it. I could have 140 songs at my fingertips anywhere. It was the coolest thing in the whole world. And then they came out with the audio cassette, Elvis Aloha from Hawaii. And now you could have 20 of these in the same shoebox, 240 songs wherever you were going, and it fast forwarded and rewinded. How cool was that? It was awesome. And then along came the CD, right? Elvis Aloha from Hawaii. And now you had pure digital sound. You could go from track to track to track. You could shuffle and it would pick up the different songs you wanted. And if you had enough money, you could have a 5-disc CD changer inside your car. How awesome was that? So cool. Now, you remember the company that sold the most number of records and then later CDs in America in the early 2000s. I mean, this isn't very long ago. The early 2000s was a combined company. They had merged Sam Goody and Musicland. Did you all have those out here in Florida? All right, Sam Goody and Musicland. Do you know what happened to them? About 7 years ago, they went bankrupt. Why? Well, the advent of these little guys, right? Where you could buy songs, just one song, 99 cents a piece, in the middle of the night if you wanted to. You heard some on the radio and you could pick it up. And how awesome was that? And my player has room for 40,000 songs. I can drive across America 10 times without listening to the same song twice. It's got pictures of my grandbaby. It's got all kinds of stuff on here. And it still has. All right. Notice the music hasn't changed. Well, of course the music has changed too, but I mean, I still got, the same music and all these. It's the medium that's changed. And I want to ask you this question. Well, first of all, I want to ask, if you're under 35, would you please stand? Okay. Why are you clapping for them? They're just under 35. All right. So hold on a minute. I see a bunch of them up here too. How many of you do have an MP3 player? Would you just raise your hands? Okay. And you listen to your music primarily through your MP3 player. Okay. Now you sit down. The rest of you who are over, let's say, just over 35. How many of you don't have an MP3 player? Would you raise your hand? All right. So here's what I want to ask you. Is your church more like this or like this? Because if it's more like this than like this, you need leadership to lead change to reach new generations of people. Right? This is just essential. All right. So lots of examples I could give, but you get the idea. I want to then move on to the last two. Intentional discipleship. Intentional discipleship. And on this one, we're going to come back to it tomorrow morning. I just want you to write in, fill in the blank. And I want you to see this triangle, and we're going to explain what that means when we come back to it tomorrow morning. Number 5 is discernment by nausea. Discernment by nausea. So we're trying to discern God's will. We want to figure out what God wants us to do as a church and where God's leading us and what's supposed to happen. And here's what I have experienced and come to believe and know over the last 25 years at Resurrection. When there's a fork in the road and you have to decide between doing this thing or this thing, and this thing seems like a slam dunk and it's easier and it's safer and it's not got the risk factor and you can just rest easy at night, and then this one makes you feel sick to your stomach when you think about it, which one is usually the right thing? The one that makes you sick to your stomach, right? The one that makes you queasy, uncomfortable, nervous, scared, right? And Jesus said that. He said that there are two paths and two gates. One is wide and broad, and it leads to what? Destruction. And then there's one that's narrow and hard, and it leads to life. right? Robert Frost said it this way: 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference, right? So I just want to ask you the question: does your church routinely take the road that's more difficult? Does your church routinely take the path that makes you feel sick to your stomach? And here's my example. We were in the funeral home chapel, and we had outgrown the chapel. We had 140 people, 140 seats. We were running 140 a Sunday. And I went to our leadership team, and I said, we need to start another worship service. And our leadership team, our church council, said, we don't want to do that. And I said, why? They said, because then we won't know everybody's names anymore. And I said, well, Jesus didn't call us to build a Christian version of Cheers, a place where everybody knows your name. Some of you don't know what Cheers is. Look it up on Wikipedia. But so what that required is I had to say to our church council, we really did have this meeting, and I had to say to our church council, I love you all so much, and I love knowing everybody's names too. But you know, our mission is to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. And I don't think that stops with the 140 of us. I think God still has work for us to do. We have to. It's not a question of if we're going to, if we want to. We have to. And then I went to our staff. Now, our staff was a part-time music director, a very part-time music director, and a part-time nursery worker, and then several volunteers who were giving their time. And I said, guys, we need to start a second worship service. They said, well, we can't. How are we going to get the ushers and the greeters and the communion servers and the nursery workers and the parking lot people? I mean, we can't even do that. We just can't. And I'm like, I'm not asking you if you want to. I'm telling you within 2 weeks we're going to, and I figure it out. And so here's the thing. How big would Church of the Resurrection be today if we had decided that we were just going to stay at one worship service because moving to 2 was too hard? We wouldn't be at 140. We would have declined since then, because you don't just stay the same. We'd be a church of about 80 a Sunday right now. You know, there's 100 decisions like that we make every year. And your church too. So the last one I'll share with you is, I'm going to share it with you 2 more. We finally outgrew the funeral home chapel, and we had 2 options. You know, I began looking for where we're going to move to. There was a Christian Missionary Alliance church nestled in a neighborhood. The funeral home seated 140, the church seated 200, and they had pews. Now let me tell you, when you meet in a funeral home for worship, the idea of having a real church building with pews and stained glass windows and a pastor's study and a fellowship hall and real nurseries and a parking lot and a sign that's there 24/7 is very, very appealing. And this little church, Christian Missionary Alliance Church, was selling or leasing their space. They were moving. And so they were, again, nestled right in the middle of a neighborhood. And then there was an elementary school gym right on the main road that everybody's kids in that neighborhood went to this elementary school. And so we went and we looked at the elementary school gym. It would seat 350, and we'd have to get there at 6 in the morning, set up folding metal chairs, put up a banner system on the volleyball poles, and then we would have to set up nurseries in the hallways, and I mean all this whole thing, and then we'd have to have it all down by 1 in the afternoon, but 350 people on a main road. And then we went to the church, and our people fell in love. It's like, oh, are you serious? We can have a building. I mean, we could have pastors. We'll still have 2 services. We could have 400 people Sunday here at this place. I mean, how awesome is this? And I was with them. I'm like, yes. And I go home that night and I start thinking about it, and I start feeling sick to my stomach. I'm like, doggone it. I know where this is going. And I began thinking, which of those 2 buildings is going to best help us build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are going to become deeply committed Christians, as opposed to which of those is the easiest solution. And then I began asking, why is that church selling their building anyway? Why are they moving? And why is it hard to find this place? And all these things began to go on. And finally, I called our church council back together. I said, folks, I hate to tell you this, but I really think we're supposed to move to the school gym. They're like, are you kidding? I'm like, it seats 350 people, and it's the building everybody knows in this community. I just ask you this question: how big would Church of the Resurrection be today if we had moved into the Christian Missionary Alliance Church in the middle of a neighborhood? And I wouldn't be standing in front of all of you. And there'd be 22,000 people who would have never come to know Christ, and tens of millions of dollars never given to missional causes around the world because of that one decision. So here's how I want to end. We had, so here's a statement. I think it's in your outline. Maybe it's not. I want you to write it down if not. I took the Franklin Time Management course years ago. I don't do any of the stuff I learned in there. I'd be a much better pastor if I did. But there's one thing I do remember that I've tried to do, and this is for business people. And it said, here was the quote: Successful business people are willing to do the things unsuccessful business people are not willing to do. However you define success. Successful youth directors are willing to do the things unsuccessful youth directors are not willing to do. Successful UMW presidents, you name whatever it is, successful pastors and successful churches are willing to do the things unsuccessful churches are not willing to do. I'm wondering, are you willing to do the hard things in your churches? So here's the story I want to end with. It goes way back to our beginning. We had a family visit the church in the elementary school right after we moved in. Actually, just the mom visited. And then I went to deliver a coffee mug to her on Sunday afternoon to thank her and her family for visiting. And I stopped by, and she answered the door, and she was a little surprised to see me. I said, I have a coffee mug just to thank you for visiting the church. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. And I said, we'd love to be your church family. She said, well, I'm sorry, but I just don't think you can be our church family. I said, well, why? And she said, well, come on inside, I'll show you. And I walked in the living room, and sitting in the living room in a chair was her, I think he was 8 or 9 at the time, her son Matthew, who had severe developmental disabilities. And she said, we just moved here from Texas, and I really, your sermon was fine, it was good actually, and the music was good, and I liked the people, it was great, but, we just moved from Texas where we had a really big church, and you're a small church, and, our son Matthew needs one-on-one care during worship and one-on-one care during Sunday school. And we couldn't expect that of a church your size. And I looked at Ann and I said, Ann, we will do whatever it takes to be your church family. I promise you, if you tell me what he needs, in 2 weeks we'll have a ministry started for him. By the way, I've always found that thinking about starting a new ministry is the thinking about it always seems harder than the doing of it. Like I dread it, like how are we going to do it? But then somehow we do it and it turned out okay. I went to our congregation on Sunday and I said, there's a little boy whose mom visited last Sunday and they're looking for a church family. And he has severe developmental disabilities. And he needs one-on-one care during Sunday school and one-on-one care during worship. And there's 4 Sundays in an average month. And so that would mean we need 8 volunteers. 1 to volunteer once a month in Sunday school, 1 to volunteer once a month in worship. And then I turned to the congregation. I said, about 150, well, it must be more than that, 220 people. I said, I told Ann that you're the kind of people that would do whatever it takes to welcome this little boy and his family into church. So don't make me out to be a liar. How many of you right now on the spot will raise your hand and say, I'm willing to do this? And I just stood there until they started raising their hands. And pretty soon a hand went up, and then another hand went up, and another hand went up, and pretty soon there were 20 people who signed up for what we call our Matthews ministry. Today we have 150 participants in our Matthews ministry that drive from as far as 50 miles away to be a part of our congregation, who have found the love of Christ. We have a scout troop. We have bakers, adult bakers who are special needs persons. We have dances and gatherings twice a month for fellowship, and they take mission trips and are involved in every dimension. They sing, they have choirs and handbells, and it's just awesome. This is a commercial we put together, or a spot we put together for our Matthew Ministry Sunday several years ago. Take a listen.
Matthew was my inspiration to come to this church and be in his ministry.
When Matthew Joyner and his family joined Resurrection, no programs were available to meet his developmental needs. This created an opportunity to minister to those with special needs and to reach out into the community with the love of God. You have the opportunity to be part of this wonderful ministry. Programs include Bible study classes for adults, one-on-one caring during worship times, Sunday school classes for students, and family night out. This event is an evening of fun, crafts, games, movies for all ages, and fellowship around a meal.
Me close to Jesus and other special needs students, yes, we just need that. This is not a want, it's a need.
In so many ways, it's all about leadership. And you are the leaders of the churches in the Florida Annual Conference. And I want to ask you, are you willing to do whatever it takes to reach new generations of people, to welcome those who need you and who might find Christ in you? And if you're willing to do whatever it takes and you practice effective leadership, God is going to do something through you. Let's pray. Would you put your hands on your lap like this? Let's offer ourselves to Christ. And I'd like to invite you just to whisper this prayer under your breath, if you would. God, I offer my life to you. Fill me with your Holy Spirit. Renew my vision. And help me to lead your church. all that I am and have, I offer to you. Bring revival in our churches, O Lord, and help us do whatever it takes to reach new people and to love them into your kingdom. In Christ's name, amen. Bishop, would you come and lead us in our closing?
It's been an extraordinary day. You can stand. It's been an extraordinary day and an extraordinary evening. We have been blessed by the music of the Bethune-Cookman University Concert Chorale. And we have continued to call leadership in our denomination. And we have begun to think and pray about our own leadership in renewing the churches of the Florida Conference. So thank you for the gift of this day. Rest well tonight, and we'll see you in the morning. God bless you.